Ms. Taylor Sky Elite Airways maintains certain standards for our clientele. Captain Walsh's voice was cold as he looked down at Jasmine Taylor and her 65-year-old mother. The spilled water on the $12,000 leather seat was the pretext he needed. Jasmine stood tall, her composure masking the fury she felt as her mother instinctively made herself small, a habit learned over 30 years of cleaning the homes of men just like this. At stake was not just her mother's dignity, but a $20 million contract that depended on this flight. The captain saw the daughter of a cleaning lady who didn't fit the brand image. He had no idea he was lecturing the CEO of an $85 million tech company. More importantly, he couldn't possibly know that his own boss's daughter, Riley Maxwell, was horrified by her father's bigotry and was about to hand Jasmine the very evidence needed to bring their entire discriminatory empire crashing down. Captain Walsh thought he was enforcing standards. In reality, he was about to become the first domino to fall in a scandal that would cost his billionaire boss everything and place the woman he just kicked off his jet in a position of power over the entire company. Before I dive into this shocking story, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. This incredible tale of injustice and ultimate triumph deserves your full attention. So hit that like button and subscribe to stay updated on stories that expose the ugly truth about discrimination in America's corporate world. Now let's rewind to see how this successful Black CEO's life turned upside down in a matter of minutes. Jasmine Taylor never expected to end her Tuesday being forcibly removed from a private jet she paid $35,000 to charter. At 38, she had built cybervision solutions from her Atlanta apartment into a tech powerhouse valued at $85 million. Today was meant to be a celebration, not a nightmare. Mom, I have a surprise for you, Jasmine had told Dorothy that morning, her eyes twinkling with excitement. She had been planning this moment for weeks, her mother's first ever private jet experience. Dorothy Taylor had spent 30 years cleaning wealthy people's homes in Atlanta's affluent neighborhoods. Her calloused hands and arthritic knees bore testimony to decades of hard labor, all to ensure her daughter could attend the best schools and coding classes. "Where are we going, Jasmine?" Dorothy asked, her voice trembling with anticipation as the luxury car pulled up to the private aviation terminal. "San Francisco. Mom, World Tech wants to meet about implementing our security systems globally. $20 million contract." Jasmine squeezed her mother's hand. "And you're coming with me. First class all the way." Dorothy's eyes widened. At 65, she had never been on any plane, let alone a private jet. "I don't know, baby. Those fancy planes are for fancy people. And what do you think we are?" Jasmine laughed, helping her mother from the car. "You deserve this, Mom." Every luxury, every comfort as they entered the gleaming terminal of Sky Elite Airways, owned by Maxwell Industries. Jasmine couldn't help but feel a surge of pride. From the daughter of a cleaning lady to chartering private jets, her journey embodied the American dream. The terminal staff greeted them with professional smiles. Though Jasmine noticed a slight hesitation when checking their documentation, she dismissed it, focused instead on her upcoming presentation to World Tech. This contract would revolutionize her company and create opportunities for dozens of young Black programmers she planned to hire. "Remember when you used to clean Mrs. Whitfield's house?" Jasmine asked as they waited in the plush lounge. "How she'd lock up her jewelry box whenever you entered the room?" Dorothy nodded. She never believed someone like me could be honest. "Well, look at us now." Jasmine smiled, reviewing presentation notes on her tablet. "You're about to fly on something fancier than anything Mrs. Whitfield ever experienced." When the gleaming white Gulfstream G650 came into view on the tarmac, Dorothy gasped. "That's for us. Just us. Just us, Mom. Your chariot awaits." The moment they began walking toward the aircraft, Jasmine sensed a shift in the atmosphere. The ground crew exchanged glances. The flight attendant waiting at the stairs subtly straightened her posture, her welcoming smile faltering momentarily. Inside the jet was opulent, buttery leather seats polished with tables, crystal glassware. Dorothy moved cautiously, afraid to touch anything. "This is Miss Stephanie." The ground coordinator introduced the flight attendant, a blonde woman with a tight smile. "She'll be taking care of you today. Thank you for flying with Sky Elite." Stephanie said, her eyes darting between them. "May I see your boarding confirmation again?" Jasmine pulled up the email on her phone. "Everything should be in order. Departure at 2:30 p.m. Arrival in San Francisco at 4:45 p.m. Pacific Time. Stephanie examined the confirmation longer than necessary. And you're Jasmine Taylor of Cybervision Solutions. That's right. It's just, we typically get notification about our clients beforehand for security purposes. Jasmine raised an eyebrow. I booked this flight 3 weeks ago and confirmed yesterday. Is there a problem? No problem, Stephanie replied, though her tone suggested otherwise. Please make yourselves comfortable while I check with the pilot. As Dorothy settled carefully into a seat, marveling at its softness, Jasmine arranged her presentation materials on the table. She needed to perfect her pitch. 20 million depended on it. Baby, are you sure we belong here? Dorothy whispered, noticing Stephanie's continued glances. We paid for it, Mom. We belong anywhere we choose to be. It's Sona, but as the minutes ticked by, Jasmine couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. Very wrong. 30 minutes after boarding, they still hadn't taken off. Through the cabin door, Jasmine could hear hushed, urgent conversation. Stephanie had disappeared after her third verification check of their documentation. Is everything all right? Jasmine finally called out. Professional patience wearing thin. We're on a tight schedule for a meeting in San Francisco. The hushed voices stopped. Footsteps approached. The man who entered wore the crisp white uniform of a Sky Elite captain, gold stripes gleaming on his shoulders. Tall with silver stray hair and cold blue eyes. He surveyed them with thinly veiled disdain. Miss Taylor, I'm Captain Cameron Walsh. His gaze swept over her, then Dorothy, then back to her. No smile, no pleasantries. There seems to be some confusion about today's flight. There's no confusion, Captain Walsh. I booked and paid for this charter 3 weeks ago. Here's the confirmation. Jasmine held up her phone again. We need to depart immediately to make our meeting. Walsh barely glanced at the screen. Yes. Well, there are certain protocols we follow for our regular clients just to ensure everyone's comfort and safety. The emphasis on regular clients wasn't subtle. Jasmine had heard similar coded language throughout her career. We are clients, regular or otherwise. I paid $35,000 for this flight. Walsh's jaw tightened. Ms. Taylor, Sky Elite Airways maintains certain standards for our clientele. Mr. Maxwell is very particular about who represents our brand. Represents your brand? Jasmine's voice remained measured despite the growing knot in her stomach. I'm not representing anything. I'm a paying customer. The plane suddenly jerked forward as ground crews positioned it for takeoff. The unexpected movement caused Dorothy, who was attempting to adjust her seat, to spill water from her cup onto the cream leather. Oh my goodness, Dorothy exclaimed, mortified. She grabbed a napkin and began dabbing at the small puddle. Stephanie appeared instantly, as if she'd been waiting for an incident. Please don't do that. You'll damage the leather. She snatched the napkin from Dorothy's hands. It's just water, Jasmine interjected, noting her mother's embarrassment. And it was an accident because of the plane's movement. This interior is custom-designed Italian leather, worth more than most cars, Walsh stated coldly. We can't have it damaged by careless passengers. Jasmine felt her professional composure starting to crack. Captain Walsh, my mother is 65 years old with arthritis. The water spilled when your ground crew moved the plane without warning. Now can we please depart? I have an important meeting in San Francisco. Walsh exchanged glances with Stephanie. I'm afraid we'll need to address this situation before departure. These seats cost $12,000 each to reupholster. It's water, Jasmine repeated, disbelief coloring her voice. It will dry without damage. I've spilled water on leather car seats many times. Perhaps in the vehicles you're accustomed to, Walsh replied. But this aircraft serves clients like Bradford Maxwell himself. We maintain different standards. The implication hung heavy in the air. Dorothy looked down at her hands, a gesture Jasmine recognized from childhood, her mother's way of making herself invisible when wealthy employers became displeased. Captain Walsh, Jasmine said, standing to her full height. I understand your concern for the aircraft. If there's any damage, which there won't be from water, I'll gladly cover repair costs, but we need to depart now. I have millions of dollars on the line for this meeting. Walsh's expression hardened. Ms. Taylor, I don't think you understand how things work here. I'm the captain. I determine if and when this aircraft is safe and appropriate for departure. Safe and appropriate because of water. Jasmine felt control of the situation slipping away. She pulled out her phone. "I'm calling Sky Elite customer service." The representative who answered was apologetic but unhelpful. "I'm sorry, Miss Taylor, but Captain Walsh has full authority over his aircraft. If he feels there's an issue with passenger conduct or aircraft condition, his decision is final." As she ended the call, Jasmine noticed the plane turning. A glance out the window confirmed they weren't heading toward the runway, but back toward the terminal. "What's happening? Why are we turning around?" she demanded. "I've decided to terminate this charter," Walsh announced. "We'll be stopping at Millfield Regional Airport to deplane you and your mother." "Terminate Millfield? That's 100 miles from anywhere," Jasmine protested, stunned by the escalating situation. "This is completely unwarranted." "What's unwarranted is your attitude, Miss Taylor. Perhaps Sky Elite isn't the right fit for passengers of your background." The mask had slipped. This wasn't about spilled water. It never had been. Jasmine activated her phone's recording function, placing it casually on the table. "Captain Walsh, are you diverting this flight because my mother and I are black?" Walsh's face flushed red. "I'm diverting because you've damaged property and become confrontational. Race has nothing to do with it. We haven't damaged anything, and I've been nothing but professional. I'd like to speak to Mr. Maxwell directly." "Mr. Maxwell doesn't speak with disruptive passengers now. I suggest you prepare for landing. Security will meet us at Millfield." "Security for what?" Jasmine looked at her frightened mother and knew this was spiraling into something dangerous. She needed to de-escalate for Dorothy's sake. "Mom, it's okay. We'll sort this out." She turned back to Walsh. "Captain, this is completely unnecessary. Let's discuss this reasonably." But Walsh had already disappeared into the cockpit, locking the door behind him. Stephanie stood guard, arms crossed, watching them like potential thieves. Dorothy's breathing had become labored, her arthritis pain flaring under stress. "Jasmine, what's happening? Why are they doing this?" Jasmine took her mother's hands. "Because they can, Mom. Because they think they can." The jet descended rapidly toward Millfield Regional Airport, a facility barely equipped for small commuter planes, let alone private jets. Through the window, Jasmine could see 2 security vehicles already waiting on the tarmac. They had been expected. This had been planned. The Gulfstream touched down roughly on Millfield Regional's short runway, the brakes squealing as Captain Walsh brought the aircraft to an abrupt stop. Through the windows, Jasmine could see the barren rural airport, a single-story building, a few hangars, and now 2 security vehicles with lights flashing. "You need to gather your belongings immediately," Stephanie instructed, not meeting their eyes. "My presentation materials are still being stored," Jasmine said, trying to maintain composure. "I need those for my meeting. You can arrange to have them shipped later?" Stephanie replied dismissively. Dorothy's breathing had become increasingly labored, her hand clutching her chest. "I need my medication," she whispered to Jasmine. "It's in my purse in the overhead compartment." As Jasmine stood to retrieve her mother's purse, the cabin door opened. Captain Walsh entered, followed by 2 men in airport security uniforms. "These are the disruptive passengers," Walsh stated, pointing at Jasmine and Dorothy as if they were criminals. "They've damaged aircraft property and refused to comply with crew instructions." "That's absolutely false," Jasmine protested, reaching for her phone to show the recording. One of the security officers, a heavyset man with a buzz cut and name tag reading Branson, stepped forward and grabbed her wrist. "Ma'am, you need to deplane immediately. My mother needs her medication. She has a heart condition. Jasmine tried to pull away, and I've paid for this flight. You have no right to remove us." The second officer, younger and visibly uncomfortable, moved toward Dorothy. "Ma'am, you need to come with us." Dorothy struggled to stand, her arthritic knees buckling. "Please, young man, I just need my medicine first." Now Walsh barked, causing the younger officer to grab Dorothy's arm. "Don't touch her." Jasmine broke free from Branson's grip and moved to protect her mother. She's 65 years old with medical conditions. What happened next occurred with devastating speed. Branson seized Jasmine from behind while the younger officer pulled Dorothy toward the door. Dorothy cried out in pain as her arthritic shoulder was wrenched. "Stop it! You're hurting her." Jasmine fought against Branson's hold. "She needs her medication." Dorothy's breathing became more erratic, her face contorted in pain. "Jasmine," she gasped, reaching out. Jasmine managed to break free, lunging toward her mother just as Dorothy's knees gave way. The younger officer, unprepared for the sudden weight, lost his grip. Dorothy fell forward, her face striking the metal doorframe of the cabin. Blood immediately trickled from her split lip. She crumpled to the floor with a cry that would haunt Jasmine forever. "Mom!" Jasmine dropped to her knees beside Dorothy, whose hand now clutched her hip in agony. "Get them off this aircraft now," Walsh commanded, standing back, making no move to help the injured woman. Branson yanked Jasmine up by her arm. "On your feet! She's injured! She needs medical attention!" Jasmine shouted, watching in horror as the younger officer roughly hauled Dorothy to her feet, despite her obvious pain. "You should have thought about that before causing trouble," Walsh said coldly. They were forced down the aircraft stairs, Dorothy whimpering with each step as the pain in her hip intensified. On the tarmac, Jasmine tried once more to reason with the officers. "I'm Jasmine Taylor, CEO of Cybervision Solutions. This is my mother who needs immediate medical care. What's happening is illegal and discriminatory." Branson's grip tightened painfully. "Save it for someone who cares, lady." They were marched across the hot tarmac toward the terminal building, Dorothy struggling to walk, blood still dripping from her lip. Halfway there, Jasmine realized with horror that her phone, laptop, and presentation materials, everything she needed for her $20 million meeting, remained on the plane. "My belongings, all my work is still on board. Should have thought about that earlier." Branson smirked. From behind them came the sound of the Gulfstream's engines restarting. Jasmine turned to see the luxury jet preparing to depart with all her professional materials still inside. "No, you can't leave with my property," she shouted uselessly as the jet began taxiing. At the doorway to the terminal, Walsh appeared at the top of the aircraft stairs for a final moment. Even from a distance, Jasmine could see his satisfied smirk as he looked down at them being dragged across the tarmac. Inside the dismal terminal building, little more than a waiting room with plastic chairs and a vending machine, the officers finally released them. Dorothy collapsed into a chair, trembling, her lips swollen and blood staining her silk blouse. The hip she'd fallen on was already showing signs of bruising through her torn pantyhose. "You can call someone to pick you up," the younger officer said, showing a glimmer of humanity. "There's a phone at the counter. Millfield is 100 miles from Atlanta," Jasmine said, fighting back tears of rage and frustration. "And I need medical attention for my mother immediately." "Not our problem," Branson replied, already turning to leave. "Airport closes at 6:00. You need to be gone by then." As the security officers walked away, Jasmine knelt beside her mother, gently examining her injuries. Dorothy's lip was still bleeding, and she couldn't put weight on her right hip. "I'm so sorry, Mom," Jasmine whispered, her voice breaking. "I'm so sorry I put you through this." Dorothy, despite her pain, reached out to touch her daughter's cheek. "Not your fault, baby. Not your fault. They haven't learned. People are just people." Jasmine helped her mother to the restroom to clean the blood from her face. In the harsh fluorescent light, Dorothy looked pale and shaken, suddenly every one of her 65 years visible in her face. Using the terminal's outdated payphone, Jasmine called her executive assistant, Aisha. "Aisha, we have an emergency. I need you to send whatever transportation you can find to Millfield Regional Airport immediately. Mom's been hurt, and call World Tech. Tell them I've been unavoidably detained, but I'm still committed to our meeting." "What happened? Are you okay?" Aisha's voice crackled through the poor connection. "No," Jasmine answered honestly. "We're not okay, but we will be." As she hung up, Jasmine noticed her hands were shaking. $20 million in contracts likely lost. Her mother injured, their dignity stripped away in minutes. All because they were black women who dared to fly on a luxury private jet. "They think they've won," Jasmine said quietly, returning to her mother's side. "But they have no idea who they're dealing with." Through the terminal window, she watched the Sky Elite Gulfstream take off, carrying her professional future away into the clouds. But instead of defeat, Jasmine felt something crystallized within her, a cold, clear determination. "This isn't over," she promised her mother. "Not by a long shot." The fluorescent lights of Millfield Medical Clinic buzzed overhead as a young doctor gently examined Dorothy's injuries. The small-town facility was basic but clean, the staff sympathetic after hearing fragments of what had happened. "Your mother has a contusion on her hip and a laceration on her lip requiring 3 stitches. Dr. Adams explained, his brow furrowed with concern. "I'm also worried about her elevated blood pressure and heart rate. Has she been under significant stress recently? Jasmine almost laughed at the question. You could say that. While Dorothy received treatment, Jasmine sat in the waiting area, her mind racing. The humiliation and injustice burned. But beneath the anger, strategic thinking was emerging. She was, after all, a CEO who had built a company by outsmarting obstacles and opponents. Pulling out the temporary phone Aisha had arranged to be delivered, Jasmine began documenting everything while it was fresh in her mind. Then she opened her social media accounts. Her fingers flew across the screen as she composed a post. Today, my 65-year-old mother and I were physically dragged off a Sky Elite Airways private jet we paid $35,000 to charter. Mom now has 3 stitches in her lip and a bruised hip. Our crime being black women who didn't know our place. This stops now. Sky Elite discrimination. She attached the audio recording she'd managed to save before her phone was left on the plane. Within minutes, her post began gaining traction. First dozens, then hundreds of responses. Many expressed outrage. Others shared similar experiences. Taylor was right. They canceled my Skyite charter last year after seeing my profile pic. Said it was a system error. Now I know better. Business Traveler 365. Maxwell Industries has a history of this. Their CEO, Bradford Maxwell, has been keeping these stories quiet for years. Jasmine's pulse quickened as she researched Bradford Maxwell. The billionaire owner of Maxwell Industries had a carefully cultivated public image of philanthropy, but rumors of discrimination had followed him for years, always silenced with settlements and NDAs. Her phone rang an unknown number. Miss Taylor, this is Marcus Johnson from National News Network. We'd like to cover your story about Sky Elite Airways, the first reporter of many who would call that day. While Dorothy rested in the examination room, Jasmine received another call. This one from Aisha. Jasmine, I've been trying to reschedule with World Tech, but they're being evasive. I think they've heard something about what happened. Jasmine's heart sank. The $20 million deal likely gone. Sky Elite had accomplished exactly what they'd intended. Keep trying, Aisha, and I need you to do something else. Contact every former Sky Elite employee you can find. Someone must know if this is a pattern. By evening, as Jasmine and Dorothy settled into a hotel room arranged by her company, Skyite issued their first statement. Skylit Airways maintains the highest standards of service and safety. Today's incident involved disruptive passengers who damaged aircraft property and became confrontational when addressed by crew. We stand by our captain's decision to protect our aircraft and ensure the comfort of future passengers. Jasmine's blood boiled at the blatant lies. But she wasn't without resources. A call to the Millfield airport manager had secured copies of the security footage that clearly showed Dorothy's fall and their forcible removal. She posted it immediately. The internet exploded. As Dorothy slept fitfully in the hotel bed, medication dulling her pain, Jasmine worked through the night. Every discriminatory Sky Elite incident she could find. Every rumor about Bradford Maxwell's attitudes toward minorities. Every connection between Maxwell Industries and similar cases. Around midnight, Dorothy awoke with a soft cry. Mom, are you okay? Do you need more pain medication? Jasmine rushed to her side. Dorothy's eyes were wet with tears. I never wanted this for you, baby. Wanted what? This fight. Dorothy gestured weakly at the laptop, the notes, the phone constantly lighting up with notifications. I cleaned houses for 30 years, biting my tongue when they followed me around, like I might steal something. Smiling when they spoke to me like I was stupid. I did it so you wouldn't have to fight these battles. Jasmine took her mother's hand. You did it so I could be strong enough to fight them and win. As dawn broke, Jasmine received 2 significant messages almost simultaneously. The first was from Bradford Maxwell's office, a terse statement supporting Captain Walsh's decision and suggesting Jasmine's accusations were defamatory and without merit. The second was from Sandra Martinez, CEO of World Tech. Ms. Taylor, I've been following the developing situation. Rather than canceling our meeting, I'd like to reschedule at your convenience. What happened to you and your mother deserves serious attention. Perhaps our companies can find a way forward that addresses both our business needs and the larger issues at play, a spark of hope and leverage. By morning, a former Skylead employee had reached out confidentially. I worked in their private client services department for 3 years. There was an unwritten policy about profile matching, ensuring passengers match the brand image. Captain Walsh was notorious for finding ways to remove passengers he deemed unsuitable. It wasn't just you. This is systemic. Jasmine looked at her sleeping mother, the bandage on her lip, stark against her dark skin, and made a decision. This wouldn't be settled quietly with NDAs and private apologies. This would change everything. Would you have taken a stand like Jasmine? Or would you have accepted the situation to protect your business relationships? Comment number 1, if you believe fighting back against discrimination should always take priority even at potential professional cost. Hit that like button if you admire Jasmine's determination to protect her mother's dignity while standing up for what's right. Subscribe to hear more stories about people who refuse to accept injustice. Now, as corporate pressure begins mounting against Jasmine, will her company survive the battle she's chosen to fight? What powerful enemies might she make by challenging Maxwell Industries? Let's find out. 3 days after the incident, Sky Elite Airways launched their counterattack. Full-page advertisements appeared in major newspapers with the headline, "Standards Matter." The implied message was clear. Their service was exclusive for a reason. Their PR team released statements questioning why a successful CEO would create such a public spectacle instead of handling matters professionally and privately. Business publications ran stories with unnamed sources claiming Jasmine had a history of playing the race card when faced with business setbacks. None of it was true, but truth wasn't the point. The point was to make Jasmine look like an opportunist, a troublemaker, someone using racial grievances for personal gain. Bradford Maxwell himself remained above the fray, letting his corporate machinery do the work. His company owned not just Sky Elite Airways, but dozens of media outlets, tech companies, and financial institutions. His influence stretched into boardrooms across America. Meanwhile, Dorothy's condition worsened. The stress and physical trauma had exacerbated her existing health issues. By the 4th day, Jasmine had to rush her to Atlanta General Hospital. Her blood pressure is dangerously high, the emergency doctor explained, and the fall caused more damage to her hip than initially diagnosed. She needs rest, minimal stress, and possibly surgery. Sitting beside her mother's hospital bed, watching her labored breathing, Jasmine felt the weight of her choices. Was this fight worth her mother's health? Worth the future of her company? Her phone buzzed constantly with updates from Aisha. 3 smaller clients had already withdrawn from contracts, citing concerns about controversy. The World Tech meeting had been rescheduled, but their enthusiasm seemed diminished. A text message from an unknown number appeared. "Drop this now or watch everything you've built crumble." BM Bradford Maxwell himself was now directly threatening her. When she returned to her office that evening, her board of directors had called an emergency meeting. "This isn't just about principle anymore," Jasmine said. "Franklin Pierce, her oldest board member, and usually her strongest supporter for clients, have pulled out. Our stock is down 12%. Investors are nervous, so we should just accept being treated like criminals because we're black," Jasmine challenged, looking around the boardroom. "Let them drag my 65-year-old mother across an airport floor, split her lip open, bruise her hip, and say nothing because it might hurt our bottom line." "No one is saying that," Franklin replied carefully. "But there are ways to handle this privately. Maxwell has reached out with a settlement offer. With an NDA that would silence us forever," Jasmine countered, making it possible for them to keep doing this to others. The tension in the room was palpable. Half her board wanted to take the settlement and move on. The other half supported her stance but feared the consequences. The meeting ended without resolution, but Jasmine felt the ground shifting beneath her feet. How long before her own company turned against her? Later that night, while reviewing legal strategies with her attorneys, Jasmine received an unexpected call from her IT security team. "Ms. Taylor, we've detected unusual activity on our servers. Someone's attempting to access your personal files and emails. We've blocked them for now, but this is a sophisticated attack." Maxwell's reach extended into cyberspace too. What were they looking for? What did they hope to find that could discredit her? The next morning brought both disaster and opportunity. A major tech blog published an article titled "The Real Jasmine Taylor," filled with out-of-context quotes from emails they claimed were from her company server. The portrait they painted was of an entitled, aggressive executive who frequently blamed racism for her failures. The emails were either fabricated or heavily edited, but the damage was immediate. Social media erupted with debates about whether Jasmine was a crusader for justice or an opportunist playing victim. Just as she was crafting a response, her personal phone rang. A woman's voice hushed and nervous. "Miss Taylor, my name is Vanessa Wright. I worked as a flight attendant for Sky Elite until last year. What happened to you and your mother wasn't an isolated incident. There are at least a dozen of us who witnessed similar situations. We were instructed to create conditions that would justify removing certain passengers, spilled drinks, alleged rule violations, anything to create a pretext." "Are you willing to go on record about this?" Jasmine asked, hope rising. "I signed an NDA when I left." Vanessa hesitated. "But after seeing what they did to your mother, yes, I'll speak out, and I think others will too." By afternoon, Jasmine had statements from 3 former Sky Elite employees describing a pattern of discrimination. One had even saved internal training materials referencing passenger profile management with thinly veiled racial coding. The tide began to turn. Other business leaders, particularly Black executives, began speaking out in support. Competing airlines distanced themselves from Sky Elite's practices. A hashtag was trending. Under boycott Sky Elite, but Bradford Maxwell wasn't a billionaire by accident. He fought back hard. That evening, as Jasmine visited her mother in the hospital, the nurse handed her a note that had been delivered by courier. "I know where you live. I know where your mother lives. I know every weakness in your company's infrastructure. This can end with you bankrupt and alone or wealthy and quiet. Your choice. Last warning." BM. The naked threat should have terrified her. Instead, it clarified everything. This wasn't just about one incident on one plane. This was about power, who had it, who didn't, and what happened when someone challenged the established order. Returning to her office after midnight, Jasmine found Aisha still working, circles under her eyes. "World Tech called," Aisha said without preamble. "They're going with Secure Systems International instead of us. $20 million. Gone. Just as Skyite and Maxwell had intended from the beginning." "Jasmine," Aisha said gently, "maybe it's time to consider the settlement. For the company's sake, for your mother's sake." For a moment, Jasmine almost agreed. The fight was costing too much. Her mother was suffering. Her company was bleeding. Her employees' livelihoods were at stake. She sat at her desk surrounded by the company she'd built from nothing and began drafting an email accepting Maxwell's settlement terms. Then her phone buzzed with a news alert. Former Sky Elite employee found dead in apparent suicide. The article named Vanessa Wright, the flight attendant who had agreed to speak out. Apparent suicide. The night before, she was scheduled to give a statement to reporters. Jasmine's hands trembled as she deleted the draft email. This wasn't just corporate warfare anymore. This was something far darker. Her phone rang again, an encrypted call from an unknown number. "Miss Taylor, my name is Riley. Riley Maxwell. Bradford Maxwell is my father. We need to talk, not on the phone. Tomorrow, 2:00 p.m. Carter Park, East Entrance. Come alone. I have information you need." The call ended before Jasmine could respond. Bradford Maxwell's daughter wanted to meet secretly. It had to be a trap. And yet, what choice did she have? The rhythmic beeping of hospital monitors had become the soundtrack to Jasmine's life. Dorothy's condition had stabilized, but the doctors remained concerned about her heart. The fall had triggered complications no one anticipated. "Mom, I need to step out for a meeting," Jasmine said, adjusting Dorothy's blanket. "Aisha will stay with you until I get back." Dorothy's eyes, usually so bright and determined, were dulled by medication and fatigue. "Is it about the case, the fight with that airline?" Jasmine hesitated. "Yes, someone with information wants to meet." Dorothy's hand weakly clasped her daughter's. "Be careful, baby. These people, they play by different rules." The warning echoed in Jasmine's mind as she drove to Carter Park. Different rules indeed. One former employee dead under suspicious circumstances. Per company hemorrhaging clients. Anonymous threats arriving daily. Cyber Vision Solutions had lost 30% of its market value in a week. 3 more board members had suggested accepting Maxwell's settlement offer. Her CFO had warned they might not make payroll next month if things continued deteriorating. Jasmine had reorganized her home to inject emergency capital into the company. She'd sold her car, her investments, anything to keep her employees paid. While the battle continued, the personal toll extended beyond finances. Friends had become scarce afraid of being associated with her controversy. Industry events that once welcomed her now conveniently had scheduling conflicts. Her phone had been hacked twice more. Her email compromised. She hardly slept, splitting time between the hospital emergency board meetings and strategy sessions with her legal team. The woman who stared back from her bathroom mirror each morning was gaunt, exhausted eyes haunted by choices with no good outcomes. As she approached the east entrance of Carter Park, memories flooded back of previous discrimination battles she'd faced in the tech world. The venture capitalist who suggested she was only getting funding because you checked 2 diversity boxes. The potential clients who insisted on speaking to the real CEO when she walked into meetings. The constant need to be twice as prepared, twice as professional, twice as controlled as her white male counterparts. She'd fought those battles quietly, strategically, building her success as the ultimate response. But this was different. This was public, visceral, and potentially ruinous. Carter Park was nearly empty on the rainy Tuesday afternoon. Jasmine scanned for threats, for ambush, for anything resembling a trap. Instead, she saw a solitary figure on a bench, a young white woman in her 20s with Bradford Maxwell's distinctive copper-colored hair, wrapped in an expensive trench coat. "Ms. Taylor," the young woman stood as Jasmine approached. "Thank you for coming. I'm Riley Maxwell." "Why am I here, Miss Maxwell? If your father sent you—" "My father doesn't know I'm here," Riley interrupted, glancing nervously around the park. "If he did, I'd likely share Vanessa Wright's fate." The statement hung in the rain-heavy air between them. "You believe Vanessa Wright was murdered," Jasmine said. "Not a question." Riley nodded. "I know she was just like, I know what happened to you, and your mother wasn't an isolated incident. Just like I know my father has been covering up discrimination cases for decades." "Why would you betray your family this way?" Jasmine asked, suspicious of a potential setup. Riley's laugh was bitter. "Family Bradford Maxwell doesn't have family. He has possessions, assets, and obstacles. I became an obstacle when I started asking questions about company practices 3 years ago." She pulled out a waterproof envelope and handed it to Jasmine. "This is access information to a secured server. It contains documentation of at least 37 cases of racial discrimination by Sky Elite Airways alone. Cases my father personally directed to be handled, meaning buried with money and threats." "Why give this to me?" "Because Vanessa was my friend," Riley said simply. "Because your mother reminds me of my grandmother, whom my father also destroyed. Because someone needs to stop him, and you're the first person who's refused to be silenced." As Jasmine took the envelope, Riley added, "There's something else you should know. Sky Elite specifically targets successful minorities for harassment." "What? Why?" "My father believes luxury services should remain exclusive. When Black success becomes too visible, it dilutes the brand experience for his preferred clientele." That's a direct quote from a board meeting I attended. Jasmine felt physically ill. "So my charter was flagged from the beginning. The moment your name entered their system, Captain Walsh was chosen specifically because of his reliability in these situations." As Riley turned to leave, she paused. "They'll come after you harder now. If you use this information, they'll try to destroy everything you care about." "Are you prepared for that?" Jasmine thought of her mother in the hospital bed, her struggling company, the employees depending on her. "I have to be," she answered. When Jasmine returned to the hospital, she found Dorothy awake and more alert. Beside her bed sat an unexpected visitor, Sandra Martinez, CEO of World Tech. "Ms. Martinez, I thought our companies were no longer doing business together." Sandra stood, extending her hand. "That's what Bradford Maxwell wanted you to believe. His reach into my company isn't as strong as he thinks." Dorothy smiled weakly. "This nice lady has been telling me about when she started her company?" "Sounds a lot like your stories, baby." Sandra nodded. 20 years ago, I was removed from a corporate event because security didn't believe a Mexican woman could be a tech executive. Different details, same story." She turned to face Jasmine directly. "I came here to tell you personally that World Tech is not only reinstating our contract discussions, but increasing the scope, 25 million, not 20. And we want to announce it publicly with specific mention of why we chose Cybervision Solutions." For the first time in days, hope flickered in Jasmine's chest. "That would make quite a statement." "Exactly the statement that needs making," Sandra replied. "I stayed silent 20 years ago, took the settlement, signed the NDA, and they kept doing it to others. No more. No. After Sandra left, Jasmine sat beside her mother's bed processing everything. The server access from Riley, the renewed World Tech contract, the mounting evidence against Maxwell Industries. Dorothy reached for her daughter's hand. I heard about your company troubles. Your friend Aisha thinks you should settle. Aisha is trying to protect the company. And who's protecting you? Baby Dorothy's eyes filled with tears. I see what this is doing to you. Maybe those board members are right. Maybe we should take the money and find peace. The suggestion coming from her mother hit Jasmine hard. Was she being selfish, putting principle above practicality, above her mother's health and her employees' security? Her phone buzzed with an alert. Opening it, she found herself staring at personal photos. Private moments from inside her home taken through windows. Another threat. Another reminder of Bradford Maxwell's reach. Mom. Dorothy squeezed her hand. Before you decide, there's something I never told you about why we left Birmingham when you were little. Jasmine frowned. You said it was for better jobs in Atlanta. That was part of it, Dorothy acknowledged. But not all. I worked cleaning offices at night for Kellerman Manufacturing. One night I saw documents about chemical dumping in our neighborhood. Black neighborhood, of course. When I reported it, they fired me, threatened me, but I testified anyway. You never told me this because we had to leave town afterward. They made sure I never got work there again. Dorothy's eyes held a familiar determination. Sometimes the fight costs everything, but not fighting costs even more. Jasmine felt something shift inside her resolve, crystallizing into certainty. That night she received a call from her head of IT security. Ms. Taylor, we found something strange in our network analysis. One of our board members has been forwarding all your emails to an external account linked to Maxwell Industries. The betrayal stung, but didn't surprise her. Maxwell's influence reached everywhere. Alone in her office at midnight, surrounded by the company she'd built and might lose, Jasmine made her decision. She accessed the server information Riley had provided. The evidence was overwhelming. Dozens of cases. Internal memos directing staff to find reasons to remove passengers who didn't fit the brand image. Training materials with coded language about profile management. Financial records of settlements and payoffs. Everything needed to not just win her case, but potentially bring down Bradford Maxwell's entire empire. As dawn broke, Jasmine drafted 2 emails. The first to her board of directors calling for the immediate removal of the member who had betrayed them. The second to her legal team with the server access information and one simple instruction: no settlement. Full disclosure, whatever it costs. The emergency shareholder meeting at Maxwell Industries headquarters buzzed with tension. Bradford Maxwell sat at the head of the polished boardroom table, uncharacteristically disheveled, his copper hair in disarray. Before him lay the morning's financial reports. Sky Elite Airways stock down 40%, Maxwell Industries losing billions in market value as the scandal expanded. How did she get these documents? He demanded of his legal team. These were on secure servers. His chief counsel shifted uncomfortably. We believe it was an inside source, sir. The timestamps show access from within our network. Maxwell slammed his fist on the table. Find the leak and plug it, and get me more on Taylor. Everyone has dirt. Find hers. Across town, Jasmine faced her own confrontation. Gary Winters, the board member discovered to be feeding information to Maxwell, sat stone-faced as she presented evidence of his betrayal. You gave Maxwell access to everything. Client list, proposals, security protocols, Jasmine said, voice steady despite her rage. Why? Because he promised to make me CEO after you were ousted, Winters replied without remorse. Maxwell owns half the tech industry. Crossing him is suicide, and helping him destroy a black-owned business was just collateral damage, Jasmine asked. Winters shrugged. Business isn't personal. Get out, Jasmine said quietly. Security will escort you from the building. Our lawyers will contact you about your breach of fiduciary duty. As Winters was removed, Aisha entered with breaking news. Jasmine, you need to see this. Captain Walsh just gave an interview defending his actions. It's incredible. On the tablet screen, Captain Cameron Walsh appeared in his Sky Elite uniform, speaking to a sympathetic interviewer. I've flown the wealthiest and most powerful people in the world, Walsh stated proudly. I know the clientele Sky Elite caters to. When I saw these passengers, it was immediately clear they weren't our typical customers. What made that clear? The interviewer asked. Walsh hesitated, realizing too late the trap. Well, they didn't. They weren't the type of people our regular clients expect to share aircraft with. What type is that Captain Walsh professional, sophisticated people who understand our level of service? And you could tell a mess. Taylor, a Harvard-educated CEO of an $85 million company, wasn't professional or sophisticated. How exactly? Walsh's face wrined. Look, some people just don't belong in certain environments no matter what credentials they claim to have. The interviewer pressed. Is it possible your assessment had more to do with Ms. Taylor's race than her behavior? This isn't about race, Walsh snapped. It's about standards, about protecting our brand from people who don't naturally fit into that world. The interview cut off, but the damage was done. Walsh had just confirmed every accusation of racial bias on national television. He just sank their entire defense, Aisha whispered. Jasmine's phone rang her lawyer. Turn on CNB News right now. The business network was running breaking news. Maxwell Industries whistleblower reveals systematic discrimination. The whistleblower was Riley Maxwell herself, standing before cameras with documents in hand. My father has orchestrated discrimination across his companies for decades, she stated, voice unwavering. I'm providing evidence of racial profiling directives, specifically targeting successful minorities who attempt to access luxury services within Maxwell Holdings. Bradford Maxwell's face appeared in a split screen, his shock evident as he watched his daughter's betrayal in real time. Within hours, Maxwell Industries' stock plummeted further. Sky Elite Partners began publicly severing ties. The Justice Department announced a preliminary investigation into discriminatory practices. By evening, Jasmine received a call from her hospital. Dorothy had taken a turn for the better, her vital signs stabilizing. When Jasmine arrived, she found her mother sitting up, watching the news coverage with satisfaction. You did it, baby, Dorothy said proudly. You stood your ground. We did it, Jasmine corrected, squeezing her mother's hand. Her phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. Maxwell board meeting tomorrow, 9:00 a.m. They're voting whether to remove him as CEO. Thought you should know, Riley. The next morning, while Dorothy underwent final tests before potential discharge, Jasmine received another unexpected visitor in the hospital waiting room, Sandra Martinez of World Tech, accompanied by CEOs from 4 other major tech companies. We've been talking, Sandra began without preamble. What Maxwell did to you isn't unique. He's done similar things to competitors, critics, anyone who challenged his vision of who belongs where. A distinguished older man stepped forward. James Wilson, CEO of Global Communications. We formed a consortium to acquire Maxwell Industries if Bradford is removed as CEO. We want you on board, Miss Taylor. Your company's security expertise combined with your personal experience makes you invaluable. Jasmine was stunned. You want me to help take over Maxwell Industries? We want you to help transform it, Sandra corrected. Starting with Sky Elite Airways, imagine turning a symbol of discrimination into a model of inclusion. The opportunity was breathtaking in its scope. Not just personal vindication, but systemic change from within. Before Jasmine could respond, breaking news alerts lit up everyone's phones. Bradford Maxwell removed as CEO by board vote. The hospital waiting room erupted in quiet celebration. Sandra squeezed Jasmine's shoulder. First domino. Now the real work begins. That afternoon, as Jasmine helped her mother prepare to leave the hospital, Dorothy asked the question that had been hovering between them. What happens now, baby? To your company, to Maxwell? Jasmine smiled. World Tech's contract is just the beginning. 5 other companies have reached out about security partnerships. And as for Maxwell Industries, I've been invited to help rebuild it from the inside out. Dorothy's eyes widened. From getting thrown off their plane to running their company. That's some kind of justice. The best kind, Jasmine agreed, changing the system that hurt us. As they prepared to leave, Dorothy grew serious. Just remember something, baby. Men like Bradford Maxwell don't disappear quietly. He'll be back, and he'll be looking for revenge. Jasmine nodded, the warning settling in her mind. Let him try. This time we'll be ready. The congressional hearing room hummed with anticipation. Camera crews jostled for position as committee members arranged their papers. Today's testimony on discrimination in luxury services had drawn unprecedented public interest. Jasmine adjusted her microphone, acutely aware of the millions watching. Beside her sat Dorothy Elegant in a navy suit that concealed the lingering effects of her injuries. The bruises had faded, but she still walked with a slight limp, a permanent reminder of that day on the tarmac. On the witness table lay the evidence compiled over 2 grueling months. Internal memos, training materials, testimony from former employees, financial records of settlements and payoffs. Everything needed to expose not just one incident, but an entire corporate culture built on exclusion. Ms. Taylor began, "Congresswoman Harris, please describe for the committee what happened to you and your mother on the Sky Elite Airways flight you chartered." As Jasmine recounted their experience, the cold hostility, the manufactured pretext, the violent removal, the room fell silent. When she described Dorothy's fall and subsequent injuries, several committee members visibly winced. "And you believe this treatment was based on your race?" Congressman Reynolds asked. "I don't just believe it," Jasmine replied calmly. "The evidence proves it was company policy." She presented the documents Riley Maxwell had provided directives to identify profile mismatches with coded language for targeting successful minorities. Training materials instructing staff how to create pretexts for removing unsuitable passengers. Performance evaluations praising employees who maintained brand exclusivity. This wasn't one rogue pilot or flight attendant. Jasmine explained, this was systematic discrimination embedded in corporate practice. Bradford Maxwell, seated in the back row, glared as his carefully constructed empire was exposed. Though removed as CEO, he remained the largest shareholder and was fighting to regain control. His daughter Riley sat deliberately on the opposite side of the room, her testimony scheduled for later that day. During a brief recess, Jasmine received an urgent text from Aisha. "World Tech contract finalized. $25 million. Press release going out now specifically mentioning why they chose us over competitors. A strategic move by Sandra Martinez." Public support precisely when Maxwell would be watching the hearings. Seething. When proceedings resumed, Dorothy took the stand. Though her voice occasionally wavered, her dignity remained unshakable as she described a lifetime of similar indignities, smaller, less dramatic, but cut from the same cloth of discrimination. "I cleaned houses for 30 years, she told the hushed committee. "I've been followed through rooms like a criminal, spoken to like a child denied service, seated by kitchens and restaurants. I accepted it silently because fighting meant not working, and not working meant my daughter wouldn't eat." She straightened in her chair, eyes finding Bradford Maxwell in the audience. "But I never taught my daughter to stay silent. I taught her to excel. And when she did, when she achieved everything America promises is possible, she was still dragged off a plane for being black in a space someone decided wasn't meant for her." By afternoon, the hearing had become a national sensation. Hashtags trended. News channels ran continuous coverage. Former Sky Elite passengers came forward with similar stories. Maxwell Industries investors demanded answers. During her testimony, Riley Maxwell provided the final devastating evidence. Recordings of her father explicitly directing executives to maintain client exclusivity by discouraging certain elements from accessing their luxury services. "My father believes some people belong in first class and others don't," Riley stated bluntly, "and he decides who belongs based on what they look like, not who they are." Bradford Maxwell stormed out of the hearing, pursued by reporters, shouting questions he refused to answer. That evening, as Jasmine and Dorothy watched news coverage in their hotel room, developments unfolded with breathtaking speed. The Justice Department announced a formal investigation into Maxwell Industries for civil rights violations. For more, Sky Elite executives resigned, distancing themselves from the scandal. Captain Walsh was fired, giving interviews, blaming corporate culture for his actions. Competing airlines announced new diversity initiatives and anti-discrimination training. The consortium led by Sandra Martinez made a formal offer to acquire controlling interest in Maxwell Industries. Most significantly, World Tech publicly announced their partnership with Cybervision Solutions, a $25 million contract specifically awarded because of Jasmine's demonstrated integrity and courage in confronting systemic discrimination. When Jasmine's phone rang close to midnight, she was surprised to see Bradford Maxwell's number. "Taylor," he said, without greeting, his voice tight with controlled rage. "You've had your moment, your revenge. Name your price to end this now. This isn't about revenge or money." "Mr. Maxwell," Jasmine replied evenly, "this is about changing systems that hurt people." "Don't be naive," Maxwell sneered. Everyone has a price. Name yours. Accountability has no price tag, Jasmine said. Neither does dignity. Then you'll get neither, Maxwell threatened. You think you've won? This is just beginning. I built this industry. I have friends in places you can't imagine. When this media circus ends, I'll still be a billionaire with connections, and you'll be yesterday's news. Jasmine thought of her mother's warning. Men like Maxwell don't disappear quietly. Mr. Maxwell, you have every advantage, wealth, privilege, connections, and you use them to hurt people who look different from you. I had none of those advantages, just determination and truth. Let's see which proves stronger in the end. The following morning, the consortium's offer to acquire Maxwell Industries was accepted by the board. Bradford Maxwell, though still a significant shareholder, lost his last vestiges of control over the company he'd built. As Jasmine prepared for the final day of testimony, she received a call from Sandra Martinez. "It's done," Sandra said without preamble. "The acquisition is approved. Now we rebuild. We want you to lead the transformation of Sky Elite Airways. Executive chairperson with authority to implement whatever changes you believe necessary." The irony was breathtaking. From being physically dragged off their plane to running the company. "I need to discuss this with my mother," Jasmine replied. "She's been through so much because of Sky Elite." When she presented the offer to Dorothy, her mother smiled. "Take it, baby. Change it from the inside. Make it a company that would never do to anyone what they did to us." As they prepared to leave for the final hearing, Dorothy paused, her expression turning serious. "Just remember something, Jasmine. Men like Bradford Maxwell have spent lifetimes believing they own the world. When you take pieces of their world away, they don't forgive. They wait. They plan. They strike when you least expect it." Jasmine nodded, the warning settling deep in her consciousness. "Then we'll need to be smarter, stronger, and more prepared than he expects." Dorothy squeezed her daughter's hand. "Always have been, always will be." 1 year later, Jasmine stood at the window of her new office, watching a gleaming jet taxi toward the terminal. The aircraft's livery had been redesigned, the former Sky Elite logo replaced with Ascend Airways in bold colors. The company's rebirth was nearly complete. The congressional hearings had sparked industry-wide change. New regulations specifically prohibited discrimination in charter and private aviation. Training standards were overhauled. The Taylor standards for equitable treatment were being adopted across luxury service providers. Cyber-vision solutions had not only survived but thrived. The World Tech contract had opened doors to partnerships with global companies seeking both technological security and ethical business practices. Jasmine had promoted Aisha to Chief Operating Officer, allowing herself to divide time between cyber-vision and her new role transforming the former Sky Elite Airways. Dorothy had become an unexpected spokesperson for elder rights and dignity, establishing a foundation to help older Americans navigate discrimination and advocate for themselves. Her speech at the White House Conference on Aging had received a standing ovation. The office door opened and Sandra Martinez entered with the morning's financial reports. Ascend Airways is showing 7% growth this quarter. She announced client satisfaction scores are at record highs. The diversity initiatives are working. Our clientele demographic now matches actual success demographics in the country, not just old stereotypes. Jasmine nodded with satisfaction. And the new crew training program, 98% completion rate. Every employee from pilots to ground staff has gone through comprehensive anti-BS training. The incident reporting system has logged 0 discrimination complaints for 3 consecutive months. The transformation hadn't been easy. Entrenched attitudes resisted change. Some employees had resigned rather than adapt. But the company emerging from the ashes of scandal was stronger, more inclusive, and surprisingly more profitable. "Any word on Bradford Maxwell?" Jasmine asked. Sandra's expression tightened. "Still living in Switzerland, still giving interviews claiming he was the victim of cancel culture, still threatening lawsuits that never materialized because the evidence against him is too strong. Maxwell had escaped criminal charges through legal maneuvering, but his reputation was irreparably damaged. Former associates distanced themselves. Invitations to elite gatherings dried up. The very exclusivity he had weaponized against others now worked against him. And Captain Walsh. Jasmine rarely spoke his name, but never forgot the man who had orchestrated her mother's humiliation. Last I heard, he was trying to get hired by private clients in the Middle East, Sandra replied. No commercial airline will touch him. His pilot's license review is still pending with the FAA after the ethics violations. Jasmine's intercom buzzed. Miss Taylor, your mother has arrived for the inaugural flight. Today marked the ceremonial launch of Ascend Airways' new business model luxury service without exclusionary practices. The first flight would carry a diverse group of successful entrepreneurs, including many who had previously faced discrimination on Sky. Dorothy entered the office wearing a tailored burgundy suit, her silver hair elegantly styled. Though she still walked with a slight limp, her posture radiated dignity and strength. Ready for your first positive private jet experience, Mom? Jasmine asked, embracing her. Dorothy smiled. Never thought I'd set foot on one of these planes again. Life has strange ways of coming full circle. As they walked through the terminal toward the waiting jet, employees nodded respectfully. The new Ascend Airways culture emphasized treating every client with equal dignity. No assumptions, no profiling, no maintaining brand exclusivity at the expense of human respect. At the entrance to the jet bridge, Jasmine was surprised to see Riley Maxwell waiting. The daughter of Bradford Maxwell had paid a heavy personal price for her whistleblowing, family estrangement, death threats, public scrutiny, but she had remained steadfast in her testimony and support. I wouldn't miss this, Riley said, embracing Jasmine. Watching something my father built to exclude people transform into something that welcomes everyone, it feels like healing. The three women boarded together, greeted by a diverse flight crew trained under the new protocols. The cabins sparkled with the same luxury as before, but the atmosphere was entirely different. Warm, welcoming, genuinely hospitable. As other passengers arrived, tech entrepreneurs, financial leaders, creative directors from various backgrounds, Jasmine observed their ease, their sense of belonging. No suspicious glances, no questioning of credentials, no subtle signals they didn't belong. Once airborne, Jasmine proposed a toast to transformation of companies, of industries, and of expectations about who belongs where. Glasses clinked as the jet climbed smoothly through clouds. Dorothy gazed out the window, tears glistening in her eyes. What are you thinking, Mom? Jasmine asked softly. About journeys, Dorothy replied. How far we've come, how far we still have to go. Later that evening, as Jasmine helped her mother from the return flight, her phone buzzed with an alert. A business publication had published a major feature, How Jasmine Taylor Transformed Private Aviation After Discrimination. The article detailed the industry-wide changes sparked by their experience. New regulations, new training, new awareness. Countless people who would never face what they had faced because they had refused to stay silent. As they walked through the terminal, Jasmine noticed a familiar figure watching from a distance. Bradford Maxwell himself apparently returned from Switzerland. Their eyes met briefly across the crowded space. His gaze burned with resentment, but Jasmine felt no fear, only resolve. Some battles ended, others continued. The work of transformation was never truly complete. Miss Taylor, a young black girl, perhaps 10 years old, approached tentatively with a magazine in hand. Would you sign this? I did my school project on you. I want to build companies like you when I grow up. As Jasmine signed the magazine, Dorothy smiled at the girl. What's your name, sweetheart? Zoe, the girl replied. Well, Zoe, Dorothy said, remember something important. No one can tell you where you belong. You belong wherever your dreams and hard work take you. Later in the car ride home, Jasmine reflected on their journey from humiliation on an airport tarmac to industry-wide transformation, from injury to advocacy, from victimization to leadership. We changed things, Mom, she said quietly. Really changed them. Dorothy took her daughter's hand. That's always been the real dream, baby. Not just surviving the world as it is, but reshaping it into what it should be. As they drove into the sunset, Jasmine thought about the next generation. Girls like Zoe, who might never know the barriers her mother had faced or that she herself had confronted. They would face other challenges, other battles, but perhaps they would stand on slightly higher ground because of the ground gained today. The work continued, the journey evolved, but tonight they had earned their moment of victory. This powerful story reminds us that systemic change often begins with a single act of courage. Jasmine and Dorothy faced a choice many encounter when confronting discrimination. accept injustice for personal comfort, or stand firm despite the cost. Their journey teaches us that true transformation requires sacrifice, strategic thinking, and unwavering resolve. The story also illustrates how discrimination doesn't disappear with success. It simply takes different forms. Despite Jasmine's wealth and achievements, she still faced the same prejudices her mother encountered decades earlier, showing how deeply entrenched these attitudes remain in society. Perhaps most importantly, we learn that accountability creates lasting change. By refusing the settlement, in NDA, Jasmine ensured that what happened to her and Dorothy wouldn't happen to others. One voice became many, ultimately transforming an entire industry. Finally, the story demonstrates the power of allyship. Without Riley's whistleblowing, Sandra's business support, and countless others standing in solidarity, the fight would have been much harder. Real progress requires both the courage of those directly affected and the conscience of those with privilege to create meaningful change. What discrimination have you witnessed or experienced that needed challenging? Would you have risked everything like Jasmine or taken the settlement for security? Comment below with your thoughts. If this story moved you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more powerful racism stories that inspire courage and change. Share this video with someone who needs encouragement to stand up against injustice in their own life. Thank you for joining me on this journey through one of the most compelling racism stories of our time. Together we can build a world where dignity isn't determined by appearance, but guaranteed by justice. Stay strong, stay determined, and never stop fighting for what's right.